Hello, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Nola Boyer, and this is my co-host, Lori Vida.
Hello, Nola.
Hey, Lori. You know, in an age where nearly everyone uses the internet to access social media and websites every day, it's really surprising how little we talk about accessibility and the importance of creating content for all users.
Oh, I totally agree. Digital accessibility, which is also sometimes referred to as ADA compliance or inclusive design, makes content available to all people regardless of their ability level.
Yep. And you know, accessibility doesn't just mean providing information to those living with disabilities. It also means ensuring that people whose primary language is not English, that they can also understand the information. To explore this important topic and the ways agencies can improve communication to all citizens, we're talking to Hannah Bourgeois. Hannah is the Content and ADA Compliance Lead at Conceptual Communications. She's here today to share her knowledge, experience, and tips to make local government agency websites and social media feeds accessible to everyone. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you guys so much for having me today. So digital accessibility isn't talked about nearly as much as it really should be. So I'm excited to share some easy tips to help municipalities and companies improve their online content.
Well, we're glad that you're here to talk about that too. Hannah, could you explain to listeners what is digital accessibility and why is it so critical for governments and organizations to incorporate it in their online presence?
Yeah, absolutely. So in short, it means access to information and resources for everyone, including those with different ability levels. Accessibility takes into consideration the limitations that people might be faced with, whether they're blind or have limited sight, they're deaf or hard of hearing, or, for instance, people who don't speak English as a first language. And it really just makes that content available to them in the way that they can understand. Without accessibility, you really miss out on connecting with your full audience. And not only does it enhance that connectivity, but it enhances your reach and strengthens loyalty and trust with your audience because you've made the content accessible to them.
Yes, that makes complete sense. And it makes practical sense for any municipality to want to reach their full constituency. From a legal standpoint, though, are there any requirements that municipalities or companies should be following to make sure their information is accessible?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked that. There's actually 3 legal requirements that enforce accessibility. So Section 504 and 508 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act address any agency that receives federal funding and all federal agencies. So think of public schools and all of the acronyms like FBI, TSA, DOD, all of those. There's also the one that most people know about, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title II of that act addresses specifically the state and local governments and requires them to provide equal opportunity for disabled individuals. While these acts are technically only enforceable to those public organizations, all companies really should be creating accessible content.
We agree. And if they're not, they risk excluding, in some cases, a significant portion of their target audience. Knowing how important this topic is, it's hard to believe more organizations aren't taking steps towards digital accessibility. Hannah, can you share how you've been helping the clients you work with implement ADA practices in their digital marketing?
So I'll start with the copy and the messaging that we've been doing. We always use plain speak and limit abbreviations and acronyms. This makes our content way easier to understand, and especially for people who aren't speaking English as their first language. So, for instance, we simplified the COVID-19 social media messaging for the City of Stamford's health department to make it clear and easy for residents to understand where to go for free vaccine. I mean, we all remember how confusing a lot of the communications were, and, you couldn't get a straight answer for everyone. So it was imperative for us to really nail down where can they go, what do they need to do, and just simplifying all of that. So instead of saying, you may receive your COVID-19 vaccine by visiting one of our free clinics and insurance is not required, we wrote it as free COVID-19 vaccines are available at our clinics. No ID or insurance required. And then we also translated it into multiple languages.
That's so much easier to understand. I mean, that rewritten version, it's so much more direct. Those sentences are very short and digestible for people who speak English as a second language. They may not understand this big strung along sentence, but That makes it so much easier to understand. And I especially like that you mentioned translating it into multiple languages, because with how diverse our communities are, some people are just going to be more comfortable reading information in their native language. Do you have any other tips for website copy or social media posts?
Yeah, so while they are very fun to use, it's best to limit hashtags and emojis in social media copy because screen readers don't read them easily, and it often comes out as a jumble of words. For those of you who may not know, screen readers are programs that you can download onto your computer that basically picks up any words that are on the website, the social media, whatever it might be. This is kind of where the alternative text comes into play. Whenever you have social media copy, we always recommend including multimedia. So whether that's a graphic, an image, or a video or something of that nature. Alternative text is a written description that explains what's going on in that image or graphic. And that way, the screen reader is actually able to pick up what's on that graphic and explain that to somebody who is limited sight or who's blind. And they get that same experience as someone who's sighted. For example, before posting a Memorial Day message for the Broward League, we added in the alt text describing the flag that was in the picture and then typed out whatever copy was on that graphic. And nowadays it's really handy and really easy to add in alt text because Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and many of the other major social media platforms now all offer the option to add in alt text through their native sites. And a lot of scheduling platforms are actually adding in the option as well.
That is really helpful. These tips are very helpful, and the information you've been sharing is so important. I do have one more question, though, before we go. Are the captions we see on videos a lot of the times, are they also part of accessibility?
Yeah, absolutely. While they make viewing videos on silent way easier for everyone, the closed captions are really crucial for people who are hard of hearing. Most platforms now offer the opportunity to add in auto-generated closed captioning, or you can even upload a transcript if you have it, and closed captioning isn't available. That way everyone can enjoy your video.
That's great. Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing your tips and ideas. We are sure the information you've provided will help government agencies make their content accessible to all members of the community. For anyone wanting information, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, my pleasure. So this, again, is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's way more that we could have discussed on color contrast, hyperlinking, so much more. But in the meantime, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, are a really helpful resource to help ensure web accessibility. And there's now tips on there for social media accessibility as well.
Thank you again, Hannah, for joining us today to talk about the approaches you and Conceptual Communications use with public sector clients and for sharing some of those strategies with us. Knowing how important it is for government agencies and organizations to reach residents and community members, this will be helpful.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was such a pleasure, and I just love being able to give the word out there and help organizations, whether they're public or private, make their content accessible.
Listener, if you would like to find out more about Conceptual Communications, visit conceptualpr.com. Be sure to check out other episodes of the Messaging Matters podcast. Thank you for listening.